this survivor to thriver study was really a survey that we did with our customer base. So we're going to explain a little bit about what we did, talk about the methodology, and then get into some findings, and then we'll wrap things up with some Q&A at the end. In terms of the overview here, we've been around for a number of years, almost 13 actually, and we've had a number of different customers. You can see about 500 or so on. And when you're in sales, you always wonder, are customers buying because they have to, or are customers buying because they think that there's going to be some value that they can provide? I happened to be talking to a customer earlier this week, and we were talking about what they were doing. They were at ITSM, and what are some of the things, and they talked about incident and problem and change, and that was about all they were doing. And I said, well, is it a value for your organization, or is it like a necessary evil, something you have to do? And they said, well, we didn't really even think about it as a value center. We just thought that this was something we had to do. Now that was a government, pretty large government organization, and I don't know that that's necessarily typical in government, but I thought I would throw that out anyway. So to talk about this whole idea of being a survivor, being a thriver here, there was a study that we referred to, and it was called Managing Beyond the Costs and Risks of IT Friction. It was from an organization called IDC, and they took a look at IT friction. And you might be thinking, well, what does that mean exactly? Well, to give you an example, I was working on my laptop a little while ago, and I was filling out a government form, and of course I do that a lot. And this particular one, I think it was in Microsoft Word, and I was really having a hard time getting the formatting to work out. It was something that somebody kind of fouled up, and so I worked, and I wanted to get it right. I probably could have just printed the darn thing out and filled it in by hand and then scanned it in. It would have taken me less time, but pretty soon, a half hour went by, and I finally got it done, and I thought, wow, that was kind of a waste of time. So that's known as IT friction, and if you multiply that by that sort of thing happening within large companies on a regular basis, then you're talking about some real dollars. And so in this study, they showed that those organizations that were thrivers had less IT friction than their survivor counterparts, and therefore were more productive, were more competitive in their marketplaces. So you would think, why not? Why not get some value out of your IT system? So I wanted to, for those of you that have been around a long time, you may appreciate this, because if you haven't heard about IT friction, or even becoming a survivor, or becoming a thriver, it's becoming a little bit more common now. In fact, somebody that works for us here said, hey, I just got back from a church service, and that was the title of the sermon, moving from a survivor to thriver. So it's a pretty multifunctional term, I guess you could say. Anyway, IT friction, the whole concept is not new. And in fact, that back in 2001, there was this company called Peregrine Systems, and we had worked with Peregrine. We were, of course, a Peregrine partner, and this was at the company prior to RightStar. And so that's when I first heard about it. And because this has been so many years, 15 years is a long time, it's very short. Let me just play this commercial that they had for you. And you should be able to hear it okay. I've got the volume turned up, and it's quick. So let me just hit the button, and you guys could.
Your business is small. Managing infrastructure and relationships is easy. But with growth, complexity develops. Friction points arise. Efficiencies are lost. That's why 90% of the Fortune 500 use solutions from Peregrine. Peregrine software eliminates friction points. The right people have the right tools and the right answers, and then they can really perform. Peregrine Systems. Frictionless business.
So anyway, I think you all get the idea, and I'm not sure that that's exactly what your organization looks like, but we certainly want to be not the goofed up group, but we want to be the group that's got it all figured out. So let's start off with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey liked to say, and I'll give you the answers right up front. Well, what are the 4 key takeaways from this study that we commenced? And the first one is that customer satisfaction continues to be the number one goal for the service desk. And if you guys are familiar with a company called MetricNet, and the guy that runs that company is Jeff Rumberg, and he's at most of the ITSM shows that you may or may not have attended, when he does this kind of benchmarking, that's what he comes up with as well. So that was pretty consistent. The number two takeaway, however, is cost, and that's again what Jeff basically says, is that lowering the overall cost of service management is really what you'll typically find. But we didn't find that at all, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So that was a little bit surprising. Number three was improvements in reporting. Now, I hear that all the time. When I go to talk to customers, they say, we just upgraded the system, we've improved our processes, we've fine-tuned our reporting, and we have a much better feel for how we're doing. And that's the real value that we're seeing with this new tool set, as an example. And then the fourth thing is contrary to what some people may be hearing, customers are excited about self-service, and I know some people would just as soon pick up the phone and call. It may just seem a whole lot easier, but self-service is kind of where it's going, and especially with the service catalog. So, and we'll get to that a little bit later as well. But let's talk about the methodology. I just want to run through this. We started out with a test group, and it wasn't a huge number. I think we talked to around 20 customers or so, but we spent some time with each one, and we focused on, since we're a BMC solution provider, we focused on some BMC customers, Remedy, Force, and Footprints, and we found out that if we took a look at how they all broke out, and because we are focused, somewhat in the mid-market space, we have a fair number of Footprints and Remedy Force customers. You can see that Remedy Force came out to be sort of number one, and followed by Remedy and then Footprints. Now, that's not necessarily representative of BMC, but that may have been a pretty good cross-section in terms of our customers. Now, you probably all heard of the Gartner process maturity model, and as you can see, you kind of had a chance to rank yourself. So some of those answers you may have put up there on the board, and I think we came up to being maybe between reactive or proactive, and that's really what we found in this study, is that the majority of our customers that we've talked to were at less than level 3 here, or somewhere proactive or reactive. I don't think we have too many out there that are really at chaos right now. So we set off to try to find out a little bit more about that, and again, what can some of these organizations do to sort of step things up and to become a thriver? Well, how did we do this, and what did we find? Well, we asked a number of pointed questions about where they were in terms of the process that they were using, the tool set that they were using, whether you were taking advantage of some of the functionality that was out there, and we found out that these sorts of things that you can see listed on the screen were important, and those customers certainly that were monitoring or doing some sort of benchmarking are probably more on the survivor side, and that was good because that was really the majority, as you can see. However, when we looked a little bit further, we saw that really not that many are doing much around self-service or service catalog. So we were a little bit surprised about that. And then when it comes to cost, hardly any of the customers, in fact, we got a big fat 0, really tracked cost to any type of extent. So when we mapped it all out, we said, well, we've got about 15% thrivers and about 85% survivors. And let me just talk about this whole subject cost in a little bit more detail, because I was surprised about it. I was really thought that cost ought to make more of a difference to some of the customers that we were working with, and so I had an opportunity. I was attending a CIO function, and they had a number. You probably have seen some of these. We get a number of CIOs up on the stage, and they pontificate about what they're doing and everything that's going on in their IT world. And so I raised my hand. I said, hey, we just did this study, and it's all about ITSM and, better, cheaper, and faster. And we found out that most of our customers didn't really care much about cost or how much they were spending, and didn't seem to really track it much. Why's that, or what's up? And so one of the CIOs, he answered, he said, well, better, cheaper, or faster, pick 2. And then another one said, well, in our organization, our budgets are just huge, and our IT budgets and I guess these were some, pretty big organizations, but he said, anyway, our IT budgets are a percentage of our overall budget, and then if you look at the ITSM side, that's an even a smaller percentage. So it just doesn't really get much of a second thought. So if we were going to spend a little bit or a lot of money, it's not that big a deal to us. So I thought, well, there must be some cost-conscious companies or organizations out there, but we'll try to look for them on our next survey. But what we did find interesting at this is that survivors are on the cusp of becoming thrivers. So there's a lot of good things that are happening. If you happen to go out to the BMC Engage show in Vegas last September, and they're going to have another one, by the way, coming up this September as well, you'll see a number of organizations that are doing really terrific things with automation and especially around closed-loop change management, provisioning of servers, and so on. And it's starting to make a big difference because of the potential cost savings. If you're not concerned about cost, and you can certainly see the labor that you're saving so that you can focus those resources on other things. And we even had one customer that we were working with, and what a person's job was, because they're such a big organization and they were in the hospitality space, and they had so many people leave on a weekly basis that it was somebody's full-time job just to delete and add within the Active Directory and all the other accounts. So it's just kind of a kind of amazing thing that you can automate something like that, and you're going to save one full man person per year to do something like that. So there really is opportunity to create some value and to make a difference. Now, I like to use the analogy of a car when you're talking about an ITSM tool set. And, if you have a Honda Civic or if you have a Ferrari or a high-end Mercedes or something, all these cars have pretty neat bells and whistles. Obviously the Ferrari goes a whole lot faster, but if you just want to get from point A to point B, the Honda Civic does a very nice job. Now, what's important, though, is that you need to have guardrails in place, right? Because if you're going very fast, you don't want to leave the road. So the Thriver companies that we looked at, and I'm just going to highlight this last point up here where it says configuration, not customization. But anyway, the Thriver companies had these ITSM guardrails in place. That's why they were Thrivers. So a good example here is the very best companies, it was all about configuration, not customization. So as you all know, well, maybe not everybody knows, but if you've been in the ITSM space and maybe if you've been a Remedy customer in the past, you knew that years and years ago, it was a tool set. And it was really up to you to customize the heck out of it to get that kind of value out. The challenge that you ran into was that when you tried to upgrade, it made it a little bit challenging. And so BMC wised up as an example, and they said, okay, we're going to base our product, certainly moving forward, on its ability to be easily configured and not customized. And so some of the old Remedy developers that really kind of got their kicks on customizing the product now had to learn, well, it's not quite the same. It's more on the configuration side. Now, there's still plenty of integration work and still some customization work, so all is not lost, but you can still do that. Well, it's a little bit, and this is another analogy that I wanted to throw at you, but it's a little bit like the difference between Buddhism and Catholicism. And if you're familiar with Buddhism, you know that you have an underlying mindset that guides why people do certain things, but the specifics can vary wildly. And so it's a little bit like in the early days of ITSM or even ITIL, where ITIL provides a framework, but there was not really any instruction manual that came along with it. It was really up to the practitioner. Now, that's changed because things have moved a little bit more towards Catholicism, where really the aim is to replicate preordained design beliefs and practices, so that if you go to a Catholic church in one part of the country and then you're on vacation, you go in another part of the country, you're probably going to get a fairly similar experience. And so that's the whole idea behind, for example, BMC's Service Management Process Module, or SMPM. Now, it's really all about configuration, not customization. So again, it's these top companies, these Thrivers, that have these guardrails in place.